Danny, the last time we were here, most of this wasn't done. We're still operating with a car that was designed basically 50 years ago. And you spent at least 2 years now updating this car, bringing it up to spec, getting new power plants. We know what this car is going to do. We know what you're going to do. Give us a little background on the technical side. Tell us about the engines, the drive line. Fill us in a little bit about what's in the engines, what size engines, fuel, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Well, George, the engines are basically they're Hemis, aluminum block Hemis. A fuel combination, as in drag racing. They have to run a little bit longer. They're dry blocks, so they're cooled by fuel, -20 fuel lines to get to them. They're 500 cubic inches. Probably start on 50% nitro, 50% alcohol, and we figure somewhere around 2,000 horsepower per engine, so there's 2 of them. Now the front engine sits in the front of the car backwards, and the rear end, transmission, and bell housing all hooked to it. So you go bell housing, clutch, then you go into what we call a Hadley box. And the reason it's a Hadley box is because Dave Hadley from SK Specialties built it. Now it consists of 2 blower pulleys, a regular top fuel blower pulley, and a top fuel 4-inch wide blower belt. And then what that does is that drives it doesn't really drive, it hooks the front engine to the back engine. So there's a Hadley box on each end. And then through that belt, there's 3-piece dry shaft that goes in between them. And what they do is they don't drive each other, but they talk to each other. So they should keep the 2 engines in sync.
So that drive shaft between the 2 engines is basically to keep the engines in sync, but they're not. But they're actually independent as far as driving. Front engines driving the front, rear engines driving the rear.
That's exactly right. It's a little bit confusing, but we're pretty sure, we're pretty confident it's going to work. You know, whenever you're experimenting, you never quite know. But that's what it does. It just sinks them. It's behind the clutches on each side. So if the front engine quit and the clutch fingers disengage, the rear engine then will drive the front wheels. Not through the engine, but through the transmission, right, and drive the front wheels. Right. So it'll drive the front wheels just long enough so you can shut the engine off.
It's a safety factor almost.
A safety factor. Yeah. And to keep them tuned so the front engine doesn't run away from the rear engine. And you know, like if you get a whole lot of wheel slip, it should limit all of that. Yeah. So then we're running B&J 3-speed transmissions. They're air shifters, and they go into a rear end. The rear ends are pretty unique because Ermi Hermoso, who was pretty famous at Bonneville, and I mean, built headers, did all sorts of stuff in the early hot rod days, had some really nice hot rods. He built 6 of these rear ends, and my dad ended up with 4 of them, or my dad ended up with 3, and he ended up with 3, and they were built 46 years ago when this car was built. And they're a little bit funny because the gear ratios have changed so much. Our final drive is 1-to-1 in this thing.
No overdrive.
No overdrive. So at 1-to-1, at 6,500 miles an hour, 6,500 RPM. That should be somewhere around 500 mile an hour.
Good.
Now that's with basically no wheel slip, which you're still going to have. I think if the car is running really, really well, you're going to have probably 4 to 8% wheel slip when everything's almost perfect.
On the shifters, you don't shift independently. I mean, it must be something that shifts both transmissions at the same time, or? Yeah, the B&Js, we have an air shifter. And then we have equal length from the air tank and from both ends, and then you just push a button and the thing shifts. You have to release the throttle a little bit, to give it a little slack in there, or
nope. I'm gonna keep. Hopefully, I'll be flat.
Yeah.
And that's the trick. The biggest trick to Bonneville is getting the power to the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, you're driving on a slippery surface, and the Mickey Thompson tire that we use is only 4 inches wide. So, and it's got 100 pounds of air pressure in it. So the initial spring rate in that tire is huge. Yeah. And so you're trying to drive 4,000 horsepower through 4 tires that are 4 inches wide each. So that's the hard part.
This is where some of this new technology comes in, because I remember when this car was built, your dad was going to use did use a split gas pedal and be able to roll his feet to put different amount of throttle on each engine, front and rear. Didn't have enough time to really check that out to find out how it worked. He probably just pushed it right to the floor from the beginning. But this is a little bit more sophisticated way of doing it, for sure.
This is. My dad had one tachometer with 2 needles on it, and then either he would feel it through the seat of his pants, whether the front wheels were slipping or the rear tires were slipping, and then he would adjust. He would roll that foot back and forth,
Yeah.
and he could look at the tack. That's the very first thing I took off of this car. I don't even want to go there. That just scares the hell out of me thinking about it. So, once again, it's traction is the whole thing. We're driving them through those Mickey Thompson tires. The engine deal, as we were talking about, is we got ACCUFAB throttle bodies on the front of it, and as you can see from the front of the intake manifold, the throttle bodies are in front of the manifold instead of typically, which would be on top of it, like where the typical carburetor would sit. And that's because we have to keep the profile of the body very, very low, because that's right in my sight line. So John made some throttle bodies for that thing that sit real low, and we mounted them on the front when we made the intake manifold. And then we actually bring the air from the very front of the nose all the way back there through ducts and stuff.
And then, of course, in the back, for the rear engine, because of your headrest area, you have more height, so you can put the throttle bodies in the more normal position. But the engine really doesn't know the difference anyway.
No, the engine should not know the difference. The throttle bodies are the same size front to rear. The air inlet's going to be a little bit different, so the engines will have to be tuned a little bit differently. But yeah, it's a more conventional setup in the back. Well, my dad ran a blown engine in the back and a normally aspirated engine in the front, so it was made for more room in the back, so we could do that and situate it in more normal condition like that. So it's
and the engines themselves, these are Brad Anderson engines?
These are Brad Anderson block and Brad Anderson fatheads, which is the A fuel head. And then Jerry Darien kind of did the whole layout on the deal, and he's designed the whole intake system and injection and all that. And then RC Performance, Richard Catton, did the bottom ends on the motor. So so we got that. Darien, he runs the whole drag race deal and A fuel, so he's pretty switched on to that whole A fuel deal. And honestly, it's since I was involved in drag racing back in the late 60s, things have changed so much. I mean, right now you look at the fuel line on this car, the fuel line's a -20. I mean, my goodness, that's 1.25 inches. And so things have changed so much, so I'm really coming back up to speed on how all this stuff works. Yeah, half-inch, from half-inch to 1.25 inches, And then the top fuel cars use, 2.5 or 3 or something. So it's pretty amazing, the learning curve on it and the things that we're doing and everything. It's just, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and it's also the very most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life. It's so freaking cool to take what my dad did 46 years ago and get to finish what he started. Finish his job, and in the whole process, I get to go fast. So, it's a win-win deal.
Well, to me, that's part of the whole mystique of this whole deal, is that we're taking something that was begun a long time ago by your dad. He worked on it. Other people you and I both know very well have worked on it. Yeah. And now you're finishing up what he started. You'll get this record. You'll nail this thing 500. Maybe not the first shot out, but you'll get there.
Yeah, well, the whole Bonneville deal certainly is hard because the window of opportunity to run at Bonneville is so narrow, and I don't know if people know, you can't keep going back every other week or something, or once a month. Bonneville, basically, you get to run in August, September, and early October.
Before the rains hit.
Before the rains hit, and then it's closed not closed, but it's underwater for the year. So unless you're going to run a boat, you're shut down for the year. So maybe if you got 5 runs during a whole week, it would be a really, really good week. So you got to make sure every time you make a pass that you can learn everything you can. So a lot of these guys that run these streamliners run them 10 or 12 years before they even start going fast. Yeah. But with this car, my dad ran right at 400-mile-an-hour testing in 1968. So aerodynamically, we think we're real good. Yeah. We're real good, and my dad had 1,800 horsepower. Now we got 4,000 horsepower. Yeah. The trick's going to be is putting that horsepower to the ground. Yep.
And I think that a lot of people don't realize that when you talk about 4,000 horsepower or 2,000 horsepower engine, these engines are under full power for a lot longer than a quarter mile, 4 or 5 miles.
For 5 miles, and basically what we got to do is we figure we got to run about 70 seconds. When we ran the Mustang with the ACCUFAB motor and it up there at Bonneville, we went 258 mile an hour, and it took us 1:32 seconds
to get up.
So now if we're going to run close to 500, 500, that's pretty, that would be pretty sweet. We have to go over 439 to get the record. That's what
that's right now, because other people are going to be running also. So that's going to get slowly bumped up there. But I think this car has more than enough potential to do it. It's just such an exciting project, Danny. I hope people really get pumped about this thing, because this is This is a family thing here.
This is a family thing, and continuing my dad's name on there, and that's going to be the big deal. And we have 32 foot of signage on the side of it available for your name here.
Yeah, no kidding.
So need sponsorship. That's the single hardest part of this whole project is finding the funding.
Yeah.
All the other stuff's really hard, but it's so fulfilling every day. When you go home, there's something done. So finding the sponsorship, that's going to be that's going to be the big thing.
Yeah. It's going to take quite a bit of money to get this car finished and to the salt and into the record books and over a period of time. And you need someone really who's just as pumped as the rest of us are.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so many people out there. I mean, this is a continuation of a father-son story. This isn't just a hot rod story or a gearhead story. This is a 50-year father-son finishes father's dream. And Bonneville's what put my dad on the map. When he went 406 miles an hour in 1960, he became internationally recognized.
Yeah.
So I get goosebumps talking about it. It's so cool.
Okay, now Danny, I'm going to interrupt this whole thing on the race car. I want to talk about this trailer because this has got to be a one-of-a-kind beauty right here. Fill us in on this.
It's pretty magic. Seth Hammond, who is a Bonneville racer and quite successful up there, he came up with this concept. I went to him and I said, Seth, you got the bitch in this trailer at Bonneville. Could I copy it? And he says, come on over. And we went through this whole thing, and he got a guy named John Paularino that built his trailer to build this one, and this is magic. Now, one of the big problems at Bonneville is you only got 2 inches of ground clearance in this car at 32 feet long. How do you load something like that without getting 15 pieces of wood out and all that? And, you end up looking like Jed Clampett out there trying to load the car up. This thing, through Seth's ingenuity and John's ability to make it, watch this thing go. It runs off of 6 airbags, completely goes down to the ground. It's got a 2% slope built into it. This thing falls all the way to the ground. Lou and I, when we went to Grand National Roadster Show, 2 of us loaded this car by ourselves in 15 minutes. So it's a worker. Right there all the way to the ground. When you get done, you load the car up, and then you turn around and pull the airbags back off, and the thing just slowly comes back up to ride height, and that ride height's all adjustable. So yeah, pretty darn trick. It's not quite as trick as the car, but it's pretty darn close.
Well, it is. Everything in this shop is high tech. Starting with your trailer, starting with your race car. And I know what it's like to load something that's long on a trailer. Well, this is awesome. Totally awesome.
Got a winch, got a vise to work on. All up here in the box, we got pressure washers so we can wash the salt off the car, generator. Pretty much be self-contained. And this trailer, we made it be 12 inches narrower than the typical trailer. So the car's 34 inches long. It's actually the working platform. So we won't take the car off the trailer
to work on
it. It's the working platform, and you don't even have to bend over.
What about these front airbags?
So we put the front airbags on adjustable, and that way with the whole trailer slides all the way to the floor, and the front makes it go flat. Now, if we don't want it to go flat, we don't have to go flat. We can keep a little bit of slant in it. So the front airbags, when they come down, you can see what they do. They just completely collapse like that. That pin in the middle is for emergency on the road. If we lost an airbag, then it can't come all the way down. But the whole thing comes all the way down, and we had to build a truck bed especially for this trailer, so everything just comes out just right, so it doesn't come down. If there was fenders on here right now, you'd be crushing the fenders. So that so everything's really figured out technically. So the John Paularino guy, he did a heck of a job putting this thing together. These the side of these frame rails are air tanks for the airbags, and it's got a compressor inside, a little one, 12-volt one that runs off the battery in the truck, and then we also have a regular air compressor in there, just the motor off of it to fill it up. So lots of tricks.
Awesome.
Lots of tricks.
Yep. Yeah, fill us in on this truck.
Well, so this is a truck. We built that trailer, then we didn't have anything to tow this car or the trailer or the car with. And a friend of mine, Eric Hoeing out of New York, I told him that we were looking for a truck, and he came up with this truck, and all of a sudden he delivered it, dropped it off one day with a pink slip and said, here you go. And it doesn't have a bed on it yet, and we got Dave Weaver right now building a bed for it. So we got the fifth wheel and everything hooked up. Then it's going to have a flatbed on it, and it's going to be wood, and we're going to make it be pretty trick, and it's going to have cabinets underneath it, and it'll hold the air bottles and then the batteries. to start the car. So it's another work in progress.
Well, all the luck in the world. You surely deserve it. You worked your butt off. You're still working your butt off, 20-hour work days.
Yeah.
And
we're not giving up. We're flat out. We're going to make this happen. It's going to happen.
well, I've known you for a long time. You never give up.
I don't give up. I'm not smart enough to give up.
Okay, my friend. Well, good luck. We'll be down again. We'll be coming by, visit, say hi, watch, interrupt your work.
Yo, that's cool. I like it. Jimmy, thanks for coming out. And George, thanks again. And you guys are welcome anytime. And come often to see the progress.
Yeah. Maybe we can find somebody to write some nice big checks for you, too.
That would be nice. Your name here, 32 feet long.
Can't beat that for crying out loud.
No.
You can't get that on a drag car, can you?
You cannot. You can't get it in any other form of motorsports.
No, you can't.
It's a one-time opportunity.
It is. I'd write you a check myself, but I have to pay the rent tonight. Okay, Danny. Well, take it easy. We'll keep in touch.
Thanks, George.
Okie doke.